So what is the main difference between a fee-based and commission-based financial planner? And which are you and why is that?
Yeah, I think the way this industry works, it's really confusing to people who aren't in the industry, and they just think everyone's the same and every process is the same. So commission's pretty straightforward. People understand a commission. You invest dollars, you put money into some kind of insurance product, and whoever sold or placed that piece of business gets a piece of that, or some kind of commission, or maybe even some ongoing trail as long as you keep adding money to whatever that may be. So that's a commission environment. And that kind of person is motivated to find new clients and start new business and sell more product. A fee-based advisor is one who operates in not an upfront commission, but they're getting a small percentage of maybe the assets under management, which is how I operate. We work with people, they come to us, and they really have a lifelong need of services and conversation and engagement. And so we're being paid as we go through and cultivate that relationship. But also, we aren't paid something new or different if we change from one investment strategy to another. I sometimes say we sit at the same side of the table, because if your investments are growing, you're happy. If they're maintaining and providing income for you, you're happy, and you'll stay our client, and we'll continue to collect that revenue. So it really puts our goals and our needs in alignment. And what's interesting, to make it even more confusing, Justin, is that there is a differentiation between fee-based and fee-only. And some people will say, well, I'm fee-only, as though that's a superior arrangement. And that is more where someone is not affiliated or have any kind of opportunity to do a commission product. And so a fee-based person still has their licenses and registrations to be able to do that, whereas a fee-only does not. And I would say in my case, the benefit of being fee-based is there are times when it's a small family member account or something like that, where it just makes more sense to do it that way, or they may have something in place that you don't want to undo, but you want to put it under a new advisor. If they come to us and we don't want to take it out of where it is, we can still keep it in that same space and advise a client on that. So that's a little bit of a differentiation there, but I would say we're very much like that fee-based environment, but it puts us at the same side of the client. So at the same side of the table as the client, so that we're being compensated to work with them and continue to carry on productive and valuable conversations with them.
Now, for individuals that might be hesitant to seek the help of a financial planner, what advice would you give them to take maybe the first step towards securing retirement?
Well, I think you really you need to take stock of where you are. I created a tool called My Financial Bridge, and that's really a way to gather information, and it captures the continuation of a person's financial plan. So I look at it from savings, investing, and spending, or the three stages of life. So those are the things you probably should have done when you started out. Maybe you had a mortgage and took out some life insurance to protect your family. And then as things progressed, you started saving money and investing for retirement. And then you're getting to that spending phase. So I think it's a really good idea to try to inventory what you have. And then the big thing that I stress is to understand what it is that you're spending and how your what your lifestyle costs today. And that's, I think, the most critical piece, is that people know what they own. They know they have investments. They know that they've been putting money in a 401k, and they just think they're going to be investors ongoing, but they really need to spend a good amount of time understanding what their lifestyle costs, what they're spending. So I'd say that's really the first step. And that's where it really comes down to having a conversation with an advisor. Is a lot of people are introduced to us. They see us on social media and things like that, and they go, oh, well, this is a person I feel comfortable having a conversation with. And that's what we would try to do, is just get an inventory of where things are, but spend a good bit of time understanding what they spend. And from there, that's how we can determine if they can sustain themselves throughout retirement, is really that spending spending part. That's really where you need to start. And I feel that that's not where people even begin to think is even important.
You mentioned the My Financial Bridge. Now, can you tell me a little bit more about how you came up with that and how you use it to help your clients?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I've been working with people for almost 30 years. And what I found was that they just weren't organized. In fact, I had a lot of clients who years would go by and they'd call up and they'd say, do you have a statement for something or another? And oh yeah, we have it in our files here. Back then it was all paper files. And I knew you would have it because we gathered that information and we organized it and collated it in such a way that when you went to look for it, you could find it. That's just not the way we live our lives. We do the things we need to do. We pay our bills, we put it away, and we forget about it. And so over time, I realized that it started out more as a binder, and we were putting things in binders. And as technology advanced, I realized we just need to have a placeholder to know that we have these different things. And that was really the idea behind the bridge. Was these are all of the things that we have done with a client over the continuum of relationship with them. And by doing that, it also helps identify things you haven't done. Sometimes we'll meet someone who's in or going into retirement. There might be some things that they haven't put into place, such as, say it's a life insurance policy. They have an old life insurance policy. Maybe that belongs in their plan or maybe it doesn't. So we're going back and looking at what they've done to see if it still applies going forward. So that was really the idea behind it, is it is a visual to show all of the things that you've done, the things that you need to be thinking about going forward, but also it's a way of looking back and seeing what you may need to revisit, in some cases remove because it's no longer necessary, or change because what you started with made sense at the time, but now you need a little bit of a differentiation there. And that was the idea behind the financial bridge, is to be able to show a client, one, what are the pieces that we need to put into place? And then once we have that and it populates into their bridge, now you can see, yes, I've filled in these blocks and I have these things that I need. When was the last time that I looked at them? And so if something's dated 2019, maybe it's been a few years and we need to go back and revisit that estate plan or those beneficiary designations. So it serves as an agenda as we go on with the client relationship and the client's conversations.
Yeah, that sounds like a great tool. I'm a visual guy myself, so seeing something kind of laid out like that sounds like an amazing tool. Can you possibly share me of an example of maybe somebody who used the My Financial Bridge approach and maybe help the client gain better control over their financial journey?
Yeah, I think all of the people that we work with, we really try to bring that together. So I would say one of the things most commonly that as I mentioned, is I wouldn't say people are disorganized. They're just not as organized as the Gut Financial Services.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's really what it comes down to, is we'll sit down and they'll start asking questions like, I'm thinking about doing one thing or another, but there's a tax implication there. Oh, well, do we have your tax return? Oh, here's your financial bridge. Yes, we have your tax return. We can now have a conversation around that. So that's how we've used and how clients use and succeed with the financial bridge, is we'll talk about Social Security. And that's another question that comes up. When should I take Social Security? Well, we need to know exactly what your benefits are going or intended to be from that statement. That's something that we've captured along the way. Maybe Justin, I'd ask that for you now, and you're thinking, well, here's my statement, but I don't need to really worry about taking Social Security for a while. But when you do, we at least have a starting point for the conversation. And that's what I think is really unique about My Financial Bridge, is when you sit down with a financial planner, you're typically have something top of mind right now. This is something I need to address right now, or what I think is really important to talk about. And that's usually where we meet people. And I sometimes talk about the financial bridge as you can enter the road from any different point. Everyone doesn't start at the beginning and get to the end. Some people will kind of come into the bridge in the middle, and then we need to go back and look at it from looking back that way. So we're gathering that information and getting them organized. And that's what that conversation is. We do the thing that matters the most to the client at first, but as the conversation continues, more and more and more starts to get uncovered. And along the way, we've gathered the information that we know is going to be necessary. And so we're having that conversation with the client and not saying, oh gosh, now we got to go get more information. We already know what we need to know about you. So we can go right into the conversation and have a deep understanding of what matters most to them.
It sounds like you've got a lot of great tools. You have the My Financial Bridge, and you also wrote a book. You also wrote a book called "Tell Your Boss I Quit." My boss is on this call, so I won't. I'm not going to tell him I quit. I enjoy my job, so I'm having a good time. But what inspired you to write this book, and what are the key takeaways for somebody who might be reading it?
Well, yeah, it's funny to hear you say that. I was just at a business expo. I belong at the Union League of Philadelphia, and we had a business expo. And so other companies' employees were coming up and, oh, my boss is right over there at that table. Don't tell him I took that book. but the book came from the idea of really most of the people that we work with are getting close to or transitioning and living through retirement. And I am desperately seeking to find a better word than retirement, because people don't really stop working, but they do work differently or work less. And they're going through that kind of transition. And people have not really thought about how they're going to take money out of their investments and how they're going to spend it. You put money in a 401k and you're accumulating it. And so I just don't think that most people have the right perspective or the right frame to have a conversation about that. And that's what Tell Your Boss I Quit is really about, is how we engage you with in a conversation that way to talk about the purpose of investments. They aren't just long-term, I'm going to, let it sit there for 20 months or 20 years. Some of it's for tomorrow if you're retired. Some of it's for 3 years from now, 5, 10 years from now. Some of it so we're really putting a purpose and making it accountable to your goals. And then what are the things that you need to do to be organized and really have that thought? And that's what you were asking me earlier about getting organized and using My Financial Bridge. We also take that information on a one-page worksheet that we call Primary Planning Elements. I called it PPE, and I swear I came up with that before COVID came around, and that was right. Personal protective equipment. I had it first. They stole my acronym. But Primary Planning Elements is that one page where all of that information, it's your balance sheet, it's your income, it's your goals, everything we need to input into a financial plan and have that conversation. And that's really what the book walks you through, is to understand thinking of a purpose, thinking of income, and what's the information you need to measure how successful you can be, and can you have the capacity to retire? And then you can tell your boss you quit because you know you can. And that's really the driver of the book. It's just a nice way to put it in perspective and not overthink it and get too wrapped up in the numbers.
You did mention the pandemic. I'm curious, how are you finding that affected a lot of your clients? Because it obviously affected a lot of people, perhaps the entire world at the time, and financially, it was damaging to a lot of people. So what did you find throughout that process, and how are you transitioning out of that and trying to get everybody back on track?
Yeah, I think that the way we do business obviously has changed. I think that people's mindset back to my theme of the book of being purpose is people really are now thinking, what is it I want to do? And what really matters most? I think that's really a key change for people's mindset. And now they're not, they've also seen how markets can go down, and they've also seen how they can recover. So it was a very fast and painful but quick to recover time frame to understand what it's like to be a long-term investor and still be able to draw income and sustain yourself in retirement. So it was helpful in that regard as far as an education. But now what I think is what we're seeing much more of is how people are appreciative of very specific, more special things in their lives and the things that they want to do. And that leads into the kind of conversation we typically have, is really what matters most to you. And these are some of the things you really want to do. You really want to, I'll have people who want to get together with their kids and they're scattered across the country, and gathering them together somehow at one key location every year is really something that matters. And what's the cost associated? And that's a new goal in their retirement plan. But maybe there's other things that were scattered around there. And I think that's really what's helped us, is to focus. And if anything, it's helped people be more goal centric but also I think more conservatively minded on what they spend.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the pandemic, it realigned a lot of people's thinking. You know, some people would have just worked for the rest of their lives. My grandfather worked so hard for his entire life, and I swear he retired multiple times. I don't know how he did it, but he almost never put down work. And I feel like that emotional part of that. I mean, he just loved working, and it wasn't. He just loved what he was doing. And how do you handle that with somebody? Like, obviously, especially couples, they're like, we want to wrap it up. One might want to never stop working, which I experienced that in my family. How do you handle the emotional aspect of retiring and just people not realizing they don't have to go to work anymore?
Well, that's true. I think that with people, I talk about, do you have enough? If you wanted to, or if your job just disappeared, do you have enough? And then the next question is, have you had enough? And that's really how that conversation unfolds. And some people I meet, I introduce myself, and I'm Pete Gutekunst. My firm's Gute Financial Services, and I work with people who are concerned about life after the paycheck ends. Oh, I'm never going to retire. I'm always, and yeah, you are. That's probably more true today than it's been in, past generations. But you will do a little bit less. You will cut back, or you will do the part of the job that you really like. Something will adjust there. And that's usually how that conversation unfolds. But you also raised an interesting point about sitting with a couple is sometimes, oh, I'm never going to retire. And the other spouse is, what are you talking about? You've been going to work and I'm sitting here and I'm waiting for you to retire and you're saying you're never going to stop, or, that kind of thing. That's really another value of working with a financial planner is we've been in that conversation. I'm not a psychologist, but we have those kind of conversations because we've been through them and we help get that focused. And I think that really helps identify the capacity to retire, because maybe you have enough to support yourself, but you could still earn something. Or many people are now, what I'm seeing, are retiring in a very long, drawn out process. Their employer doesn't want to let that high caliber, experienced person just leave. And so they're letting them stay and help transition the next generation of leadership. And so that's been a very nice way to sort of figure out how retirement's going to look like and maybe reduce time and commitment to work. And those are the kind of conversations that we have with people. And sometimes we tell that story, oh, I didn't even think that was an option. And they go to their employer and the next thing you know, they're working 30, 25 hours and still going to work every day, but have a lot more time to so-called be retired.
Yeah, that's great. That's what happened with my grandfather. He did the same thing where it just kind of trickled out, and eventually he was finally my grandmother convinced him and was like, wrap it up.
Yeah. He had enough somewhere along the way.
So what's funny is when you said you have people that say, I'm never retiring. In that aspect, they're working hard and they have the drive and they love what they do and they're just going to keep working forever. In my experience, in my generation, the vibe is I'm never retiring because I don't think I'll ever be able to do it. I don't know if you deal with a lot of people in younger generations looking that far ahead, but it just kind of feels the vibe that I'm getting right now from this generation is what's going to be there in 30, 40 years? And what does that look like?
It's interesting that you say that. I have a sense that a lot of the younger people that I work with or have been introduced to or had any kind of conversation with, many of them had parents who went through the financial crisis in 2008 and saw them lose a great deal of money. And that gave them a mindset of being more cautious and saving more sooner or earlier than waiting a little bit longer. So in some ways, I've seen that some younger people are having I get introduced to a lot of my retirement age clients, and they say, can you talk to my kids? And we'll have that conversation. So they're starting to put money aside sooner, not later. And I think they're getting comfortable with living off of some, but not all of their paycheck. And I guess that's really the conversation that it comes down to is, I mentioned at the beginning, is asking a person what their lifestyle costs, what they're spending. And that conversation typically goes, a lot of people don't have a good idea of that. Some people are good at budgeting and other people just, I don't know, the money comes in and goes out and I have enough every month. And so sometimes the conversation is just, what's your net paycheck? And that's the number that we have to try to figure out how are we going to replace that. So with a younger person, if they're setting aside a good degree to their retirement plan, if they're setting aside, they're also getting comfortable with not 100% of their paycheck. And that's what I think is really just going through the same process I would with someone closer to retirement, but giving them an idea, of what kind of path that they're on. As you get closer and when you're further away, if I can do this visually, if you're further away and we're trying to get to a point, you have room for error. And as we get closer and closer to retirement, we have less room for error. So it's not a different process with a younger person. It's just that they have a lot more space in there. And as we get closer, we just want to make sure, are we more on point? We don't have to be as close to on target at first, but as time's passing by, that's what we want to measure. So that would be what I'd say to a young person is get yourself in the ballpark. And then let's decide, which field we're actually going to be hitting to in order to retire.
Yeah, it's starting. And I know I mentioned that I don't know if I'll ever retire is kind of a thing going on. I kind of feel like it is almost said in jest, and I'm hoping it's more so said in jest, where just based on how everything has been going. Obviously we've gone through the pandemic when we've 2008 as well. We've seen a lot of financial misfortune and in our lives. So it feels again, we're far away from it right now. But it does feel like something that is distant. And like you said, you're exactly right. And that's how I feel is I've lived through that and I've gone through and now my mindset is we got to get it together. As much as my wife loves going to Starbucks, that Starbucks is tough. But I'm kind of the one finding myself reeling in our finances and trying to get everything in track because I've seen so much already that it's like I want to be able to have something later on.
But it's interesting you bring up Starbucks. I think that one of the reasons people don't come and see a financial planner is they're afraid that my job is to tell you spend too much and you have to cut out your spending. And I find I'm working with people who generally are more established in their life's journey. And their paycheck comes in and they're able to spend their paycheck. And I'm going to say that's your lifestyle. And so if you go to Starbucks every day and that's part of your lifestyle, we have to determine, is that sustainable beyond your working years? And if it is, that's great. And if it's not, then we have to have is it worth working a little bit longer so you can go to Starbucks for the rest of your life? Or would you like to retire a little sooner and spend a little bit less because you're not going to Starbucks? That's really the conversation that takes place. And I think that that's the value of a professional relationship it isn't that there's one answer. There's a lot of different ways to get from here to there. And it's about prioritizing and it's about understanding what you can do in order to accomplish, like I said, if Starbucks matters to your wife, we'll figure out a way to get that coffee cup filled. But there's some decisions that you'll have to make along the way to get there.
That's a very, very diplomatic answer. I'll go tell my wife and see how that goes. We have to have a conversation about the Starbucks. Like, what do you think some of the more common misconceptions or possibly fears that people have about retirement, aside from not getting Starbucks? And how do you address those concerns in your work?
You might be surprised at what the most common question I get when people get close to retirement. They want to know how they pay themselves. How does money come back out of their investments? They've worked a whole career. They have a 401k deduction that goes into their retirement plan. They don't even think about it. The paycheck comes in, it gets deposited automatically to their account. Now that I'm not working, how does that work in reverse? How does that even work? That's the number one, I would say, one of the most common questions I get. But that's what people want. They want to know how do they get money out. And so that process of just, do you want to make a monthly deposit? So you're getting a paycheck from your retirement accounts or your investments. And then how sustainable is that? And most people the biggest fear I think that they have is they believe I was adding money to my investments. So they were going up and up and up. And when I start making withdrawals, they're going to start going down and down and down. And I think that's the biggest misconception is we talk about a rate of withdrawal or the percentage of the amount that comes out as it is related to the total asset value. So if you have $1 million and you take out 50,000, you've taken out 5%. And so that's what we look at with a client is that a sustainable withdrawal rate over time based on how you could be invested? Because if you're taking out, say, 4 or 5% and the asset over time is growing 6, 7, or 8%, yeah, you're actually maintaining your asset value. And that's, I think, the biggest misunderstanding. And once you come to terms with that, that's when you understand or realize, hey, now I see why Pete's asking me how much I spend, not how much I have. Because one person could have the exact same picture as another, but they just don't live as a, luxurious of a lifestyle. And so they have very different circumstances. One person might have a pension. We work with a lot of veterans, so they'll have a pension from having served in the military. That's an income stream that someone who never did that would have. So those things are all part of the equation. And once we start to look at it from an income or a potential distribution of income, that's where we start to ease that fear, and they start to get more comfortable with the fact that their assets aren't going down as they make withdrawals.
Now, in your experience, what would you say are the most important factors for individuals who are considering planning for retirement, especially for those who may be getting a late start? And also, I guess another follow-up question is, what would generally be considered a late start when they're heading into retirement?
Yeah, we meet a lot of people who have gotten their children to the point of going into or through college. And that's a big expense to get through. And that tends to be a point in life when that's really when they start to think, hey, I've only got so much time left now. And usually at that point, you're at your higher income capacity. You've probably had expenses because you've raised kids and now put them through college. That's a window of time where you start to have excess income that you may not have experienced. And if you continue to live the same lifestyle that you've been living, you should be able to do that on, it doesn't require all of your paycheck. So that's one thing that we sit down with people at that point in time, is they might have the capacity to do something at that point going forward, more so than they realized. And I think that's really part of that question, is looking at it from an income standpoint. That might be the kind of person where retirement isn't ending the paycheck, but it might be you're going to be 65 or 67 or some age. And yeah, I can work that long, and I could probably still stick around and be a consultant or work 30 hours a week. Well, for that person, it might be, well, your plan works rather well, provided you can do that. And is that an opportunity you have in your career? You have that great speaking voice. You're going to be able to be on air and do this kind of thing for a long time. Maybe you won't do it every hour of the day, but you're going to be able to keep doing that. So if the question was, would you be willing to, run videos like this for 20 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week and keep and sort of somewhat retire? Yeah, I can live with that. That's how we have to really back into that. And I would say the most critical thing is have the conversation. That's really what we're all about here, is just starting a conversation, deepening relationships. And there's questions that constantly are unfolding over that relationship, and we're here to help find the answers.
I always think about what I want to do and how long I want to do it. And I'm like, I just love talking to people. And I don't know if I'll ever not want to talk to people. I have a little I'll have a home studio probably for the rest of my life. So I'm just having a good time talking to people. So I feel like that's something that I always wonder, when I retire, am I really retiring? And how does that?
Right. That's why we have to come up. I have to come up with a new word, because retire. Yes, exactly. I don't know if it's re-inspirement. I don't know what it is, but there's something exactly. We don't stop, but most people don't stop working and then just spend their whole day on the golf course. They might think they would like that, but most people don't even like that, even if they love golf. So you want to be active, whether it's you get more engaged at things in your church, or I mentioned I belong to the Union League in Philadelphia. There's an awful lot of community service and things that I can get involved and have gotten involved in there. And those are things you can do, aren't necessarily revenue generating or income generating, but those are things that are engaging your time. And then there are things where you're still working. And that's really what I find. The people we work with have some skill that's very, very valuable long after the traditional working years. So that will be an income source. They'll have Social Security, pension, whatever those, what we call reliable income sources, and then earned income for some foreseeable future. And your investment income just supplements around that.
Let's talk about you specifically, right? I know you've told me a lot of great things. You have some great tools, gutefinancial.com. Check it out. Now, what do you believe sets you apart from other financial planners in the industry? And how do you ensure that your clients are receiving the best possible advice throughout their retirement journey?
What we do is I really stress what I just said about having a conversation. And that's usually what happens. Most people have a question or two, and they just want to have a conversation with someone. And am I doing the right thing? Am I thinking straight on this? And when you have that conversation, it usually leads to more questions and understanding that you don't have it all put together. And let's go a little bit deeper and let's have more questions and more conversation. And that's really my focus, is to spend a great deal of time getting to know and understand what matters most to you first, rather than having some sort of product or some sort of thing that we're trying to figure out how to get you into. I know my success in business has been working with people for a very long period of time. They don't come in and out of our relationship. And that's because we spend a lot of time getting to know them very deeply up front and understanding their situation. And so we're having that conversation. And so we'll put in that time up front because we know that there's a long-term value in working with that person over time. And that's what I find is, if you could say, where are we different? We have that upfront understanding of non-product revenue, commission, fee, whatever it may be. We try to really show, hey, look, let's make sure there's a good fit here for you and us together. And I think that's is not something that I find that my peers, they're trying to get to something first before they're really creating value for the long term.
And on your website, I checked it out. It's gutefinancial.com. You mentioned that you work with professional athletes as well. Mm-hmm. Now, Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts just signed a pretty substantial contract. All right, I want to touch on that with you. Now, he's got 5-year, $255 million. Highest paid player in the NFL, possibly NFL history, but NFL right now for sure at age 24. Now, if you could throw him some financial advice, what would you say for him to secure a smooth retirement, which is going to be pretty hard with all that money?
Yeah. Well, it's the NFL Players Association. I applaud them. They have a program where they vet and have not a designation, but you are an NFL Players Association advisor. And if you're a professional sports agent and you are looking to refer Jalen Hurts to an advisor, that person has to have that NFL Players Association, designation or having gone through that process. So we're proud to have that. And what you would say here is, I find these young people get so much money so quickly. And everything we've been talking about today is about spending and lifestyle and what does that lifestyle cost. And it's very easy, if you just spend everything that's coming in, to live this really great lifestyle. But that's not sustainable. As great as Jalen Hurts is, and we're going to see him in the Super Bowl plenty more times to come. We're thrilled here in Philadelphia, but that's really an income. What's your lifestyle really need to be, and how much that excess income you can afford to set aside right now. These young players have the ability. You asked me about what about people who wait too late. I think these players have the opportunity to set aside a good foundation, so that if their career ends unexpectedly, if they don't hit the big paycheck, like Jalen Hurts and some others have, if they play 4, 5, 6 years in the NFL, they'll do all right, and they'll be able to build a big, strong foundation. And that's really the conversation. Everything I've said, and I mentioned earlier, you can enter the bridge at any different point in time, but you're really looking at the end is how much cash flow can I generate in the long run, and what are all of those sources. So that's really what we would say to a professional athlete or anyone at that point. If you hit the lottery, put some of that aside and get your foundation put into place. That's really what, unfortunately, some of these young athletes don't get that message and don't get that guidance. If you liked our video today, please share. And if you have any questions or comments, let us know. And if you'd like to start a conversation, we'd love to talk to you at gutefinancial.com, and you can sign up for a conversation there and answer any questions you may have.